The screaming started at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that began like any other. LeBron Martinez was sitting in his battered Honda Civic outside Riverside Elementary, engine idling as he waited for his 8-year-old daughter Maya to emerge from the after-school art program. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The October air carried the smell of burning leaves and the distant sound of children's laughter from the playground. He'd been early as always, using these quiet moments to review job applications on his phone. 3 tours in Afghanistan had taught him many skills, but translating explosive ordnance disposal and tactical operations into civilian resume language remained a daily struggle. The first indication something was wrong came when Mrs. Henderson, the elderly crossing guard, dropped her stop sign and began running toward the main entrance. Then the fire alarm started its mechanical shriek, but LeBron's trained ear caught something else underneath the noise. Shouting. Not the chaotic excitement of a drill, but something sharper, more desperate. His body responded before his mind fully processed the threat, adrenaline flooding his system as muscle memory from Kandahar kicked in. Through the school's front windows he could see movement. Rapid, panicked movement. Children's faces pressed against glass, teachers herding small bodies away from something he couldn't yet see. LeBron's hands moved automatically to check for weapons he no longer carried, finding only his keys and wallet. The frustration of being disarmed in a crisis hit him like a physical blow, but his training overrode the emotion. Assess the threat, identify resources, protect the innocent. Then he saw him. A figure in dark clothing moving deliberately through the main hallway, something metallic glinting in his hands. LeBron's blood turned to ice as he recognized the purposeful stride of someone executing a plan. This wasn't random violence or a disturbed student acting out. This was tactical, calculated. The kind of methodical approach that meant preparation and intent to cause maximum damage. The school's lockdown procedures activated with mechanical precision. Metal shutters began sliding down over windows. Doors clicked as electronic locks engaged. But LeBron knew from his security consulting work that Riverside Elementary's safety measures were designed for containment, not elimination of an active threat. They would buy time, but time for what? The nearest police station was 12 minutes away on a good day, and the school's single security guard was a 60-year-old retired postal worker whose biggest challenge usually involved confiscating forbidden candy. Maya was somewhere inside that building. His little girl who still slept with a nightlight and insisted on wearing her lucky purple socks to every art class. The same child who had cried for 3 days when their goldfish died. Who drew pictures of him in his Marine uniform and hung them on their refrigerator with pride. She was trapped in there with whatever nightmare was unfolding beyond those locked doors. LeBron Martinez had never expected his military training to follow him to a suburban elementary school pickup line. But life had a way of demanding skills when you least wanted to use them. As he sat watching the lockdown procedures engage with terrifying efficiency, his mind automatically began cataloging entry points and tactical options. The south entrance near the gymnasium had older locks. The kitchen loading dock would be unmonitored during afternoon hours. 3 years of explosive ordnance disposal had taught him to think like someone trying to cause maximum damage. And now that knowledge felt like both a curse and a necessity. The school's PA system crackled to life, but instead of Principal Johnson's familiar voice, a stranger's words echoed across the parking lot through open windows. Calm. Controlled. Chillingly articulate. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The man inside wasn't making demands or issuing threats. He was making announcements, as if he were simply another school administrator sharing daily reminders. LeBron's blood chilled as he recognized the tone. This wasn't emotional breakdown or desperate cry for attention. This was someone who believed completely in whatever twisted mission had brought him here. His phone buzzed with an automated emergency alert, confirming what he already knew. Active shooter situation. Shelter in place. Await further instructions. Standard protocol that might work for most civilians, but felt inadequate when your 8-year-old daughter was potentially in the line of fire. LeBron's fingers drummed against the steering wheel as he weighed his options. Storm the building using skills that might get innocent people killed in crossfire. Wait for professionals who might arrive too late? Trust that Maya's teacher, sweet Mrs. Patterson, who'd never faced anything more dangerous than a bloody nose, could protect his child from whatever evil had invaded their safe space? The decision crystallized when he saw movement on the second floor. A small face appeared briefly at a classroom window before being pulled back inside. Not Maya, but close enough to her age that parental instinct overrode tactical caution. These weren't statistics or strategic objectives. They were children whose biggest worry this morning had been whether they'd remembered their homework or if today's lunch would include pizza. LeBron Martinez, former staff sergeant, current unemployed veteran struggling to rebuild his life in civilian society, made the choice that would define everything that followed. He turned off his engine, pocketed his keys, and prepared to enter a war zone he'd never trained for, armed with nothing but determination and the unwavering certainty that some battles choose you whether you're ready or not. The maintenance shed behind the school's baseball field held more than LeBron had hoped for. His hands moved quickly through the organized chaos of tools and equipment, muscle memory guiding him toward anything that could serve as tactical advantage. A crowbar for breaching, wire cutters that could disable security cameras if needed. Most importantly, a ring of master keys hanging on a peg that the custodian had forgotten to secure. 3 years of working alongside military engineers had taught him that maintenance access was often the weakest link in any facility's security. LeBron's approach to the building was methodical, keeping low as he moved between parked cars and the staff lot. The autumn air carried sounds that made his stomach clench. Muffled crying from somewhere inside. The occasional bark of commands from the intruder. Silence that stretched too long and meant either compliance or something worse. He'd heard similar sounds in compound raids overseas, but the context here made everything infinitely more personal. These weren't enemy combatants or strategic targets. These were teachers who'd chosen education over higher-paying careers. Children who'd woken up this morning excited about show and tell. The service entrance near the cafeteria opened smoothly with the custodian's key. LeBron paused in the doorway, allowing his senses to adjust to the building's interior. The familiar smell of industrial disinfectant and cafeteria food was now tinged with something else. Fear had its own scent, sharp and metallic, and it permeated the empty hallways like smoke. His boots were silent on the polished linoleum as he moved deeper into the building, every corner presenting a potential ambush point, every classroom door a question mark. The intruder's voice drifted down from the second floor, and LeBron recognized the location immediately. The main administrative area where Principal Johnson's office sat adjacent to the school's central hub. Smart positioning that would give the man visual control over multiple corridors while limiting approach angles for any response team. Whoever this was had studied the building's layout, understood its traffic patterns and security weaknesses. This wasn't random violence, but calculated terrorism designed to maximize psychological impact. LeBron found himself thinking about Maya's daily routine as he climbed the emergency stairwell. Art class ended at 3:15, which meant she should have been in Mrs. Patterson's room collecting her backpack and assignment folder. Third-grade classrooms were on the first floor, hopefully far from whatever confrontation was developing upstairs. But sound carried in these old buildings, and 8-year-olds weren't known for their ability to remain silent during crisis situations. If Maya was scared, if she was crying or calling for him, she could attract attention from someone who viewed children as acceptable casualties. The second-floor hallway stretched before him like a gauntlet. Classroom doors stood closed, their small windows revealing glimpses of huddled figures pressed against far walls. Teachers with their arms around students, some barely more than children themselves. He could see Mrs. Rodriguez from the front office, her normally pristine appearance disheveled as she held 3 kindergartners against her chest. Her eyes met his through the glass, widening with recognition and something that might have been hope or terror. LeBron pressed a finger to his lips, signaling for continued silence as he moved past. The administrative area opened into a central space designed for parent conferences and student meetings. Normally filled with comfortable chairs and educational posters, it now felt like a battlefield waiting to happen. The intruder stood with his back partially toward the hallway, his attention focused on something inside Principal Johnson's office. LeBron could see the weapon now, military-style rifle held with the casual competence of someone who trained extensively. body armor beneath civilian clothes, multiple magazines secured to his belt. This wasn't some disturbed individual acting on impulse, but someone who'd planned for extended engagement with law enforcement. Principal Johnson's voice emerged from the office, steady despite circumstances that would break most people. She was talking to the intruder in the same calm tone she used with upset parents or nervous students. Negotiating, possibly, or simply buying time by keeping him engaged in conversation. LeBron had always respected the principal's ability to handle difficult situations, but this went far beyond normal administrative challenges. Her composure under what had to be extreme duress spoke to strength he'd only seen in combat veterans. Moving closer required crossing open space where he'd be visible if the intruder turned around. LeBron's training provided options, but each carried risks that could endanger the very people he was trying to protect. Rush the gunman directly and risk him firing into occupied classrooms out of panic or spite. Try to negotiate and potentially escalate a situation that might currently be contained. Wait for professional response teams and gamble that his daughter and her classmates could survive whatever plan was already in motion. The choice was made for him when Maya's voice carried clearly through the building's ventilation system. She was crying, calling for him with the desperation of a child who didn't understand why her father wasn't coming to help her. The sound hit LeBron like physical impact, stripping away tactical considerations and leaving only primal protective instinct. His daughter needed him, and every second of hesitation increased the danger she faced. The intruder's head turned at the sound, rifle swinging toward the hallway where Maya's voice had originated. In that moment of divided attention, LeBron moved with the fluid precision that had kept him alive through 3 combat deployments. Distance closed in heartbeats. Training overrode emotion as his hands found their targets with mechanical efficiency. The rifle clattered across polished floor tiles as both men crashed into the wall beside Principal Johnson's office. What followed was brutal and brief. Hand-to-hand combat stripped of movie choreography and reduced to its essential reality. 2 men, fighting with the understanding that only one would walk away capable of protecting or threatening the children trapped throughout the building. LeBron's military training met civilian desperation in a collision that echoed through empty hallways like thunder. When silence finally returned, only one figure remained standing in the administrative area where this nightmare had briefly concentrated all its violence. Principal Johnson emerged from her office to find LeBron securing the intruder's weapons and checking for additional threats. Her face was pale but composed, professional mask firmly in place despite circumstances that had tested everyone's limits. She looked at LeBron with an expression he couldn't immediately read, something complex that went beyond simple gratitude or relief. There was recognition there, and perhaps something that looked like guilt or shame. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice carrying weight that suggested she understood exactly what had just happened and what it might have cost him. "Maya is safe. Mrs. Patterson has her locked in the supply closet with 6 other students. They're scared but unharmed." LeBron nodded, adrenaline still coursing through his system, as he maintained visual contact with all potential threat vectors. The immediate danger had passed, but his training warned against assuming the situation was fully resolved. Single attackers sometimes worked with partners positioned as backup or escape assistance. The building needed systematic clearing before anyone could truly relax their guard. "There's something you should know," Principal Johnson continued, her professional composure beginning to crack around the edges. "About why this happened. About why he came here specifically." She gestured toward her office, where files and documents lay scattered across the floor. "About connections that go back further than today." The weight in her voice suggested revelations that would complicate everything LeBron thought he understood about this attack. But first, Maya needed to see her father. First, the building needed to be secured, and the children reunited with their families. The principal's secrets, whatever they were, would have to wait until the immediate crisis had been fully resolved and everyone was truly safe. The sound of approaching sirens filled the afternoon air as LeBron systematically cleared the remaining areas of Riverside Elementary. Each classroom he checked revealed the same heartbreaking scene. Teachers huddled with their students in designated safe corners, small faces streaked with tears, whispered reassurances that everything would be okay soon. The lockdown had worked as designed, containing the children in secure spaces, but the psychological damage was already evident in their wide, frightened eyes. Maya launched herself into his arms the moment he opened the supply closet door, where Mrs. Patterson had barricaded herself with 7 third-graders. His daughter's grip around his neck was fierce, desperate, as if she could anchor herself to safety through sheer force of will. The other children looked at him with a mixture of awe and confusion, recognizing him as Maya's dad but struggling to understand how he'd appeared in their nightmare when all the adults had told them to stay hidden and wait for help. "Daddy, I was so scared," Maya whispered against his shoulder, her small body trembling with residual terror. "The loud man was yelling, and Mrs. Patterson made us hide, and I didn't know where you were." Her words came in a rush, the way children process trauma by talking through every detail until it makes some kind of sense in their young minds. Mrs. Patterson, a woman in her 50s who'd dedicated her career to nurturing young minds, looked at LeBron with gratitude and something approaching reverence. "How did you get inside?" "The police said they were setting up a perimeter, that we needed to wait for the tactical team." Her voice carried the exhaustion of someone who'd spent 45 minutes believing she might not live to see another day, that her last act on Earth might be shielding third-graders from violence they should never have to witness. Before LeBron could answer, the thunder of boots in the hallway announced the arrival of the Pine Valley Police Department's emergency response team. Voices shouted commands, radios crackled with status updates, and the controlled chaos of law enforcement securing a crime scene filled the building. LeBron knew he'd have questions to answer, procedures to follow, explanations to provide about his unauthorized entry into an active shooter situation. The lead officer, a weathered veteran named Captain Torres, found them in the supply closet and immediately began the process of evacuating the children to safety. His eyes lingered on LeBron with professional curiosity, taking in the former Marine's tactical positioning and the way he'd instinctively placed himself between the doorway and the students. Torres had seen enough combat veterans to recognize the signs, the automatic threat assessment and protective instincts that never fully switched off. "You the one who neutralized the suspect?" Torres asked quietly, his tone carefully neutral as they walked toward the main exit. Maya clung to her father's hand, unwilling to let him out of her sight, even for a moment. Around them, other children were being reunited with frantic parents who'd been held behind police barriers for what felt like hours. LeBron nodded, unwilling to elaborate, with Maya listening to every word. The details of what had happened in the administrative area weren't suitable for 8-year-old ears, and he suspected the official investigation would require multiple statements and interviews. His primary concern now was getting his daughter somewhere safe where she could begin processing the trauma of this afternoon. The parking lot had been transformed into a staging area for emergency vehicles and media crews. News vans with satellite dishes competed for position with ambulances and police cruisers. Parents pressed against the yellow tape barriers, searching desperately for their children among the steady stream of students being evacuated from the building. The scene had all the hallmarks of a national news story, the kind of tragedy that would dominate headlines and spark conversations about school safety across the country. Principal Johnson appeared at LeBron's side as they reached the evacuation area, her professional composure still intact despite the afternoon's events. She carried a manila folder thick with documents, and her eyes held the weight of secrets that were about to be revealed. "Mr. Martinez, when you're ready, we need to talk. About Derek Morrison, the man you stopped. About why he chose our school. About connections that go back to your time in the military." The name hit LeBron like a physical blow. Derek Morrison. He knew that name, though it took a moment for his memory to provide the context. Afghanistan, 2019. A fellow veteran who'd been discharged under circumstances that had raised questions about his psychological fitness for duty. They'd served in different units but had crossed paths at Forward Operating Base Chapman during the final months of LeBron's deployment. Morrison had been angry then, bitter about perceived injustices and betrayals by the military system that had trained him to kill and then struggled to help him readjust to civilian life. "You knew him?" Maya asked, her young mind picking up on the tension in her father's voice. She looked between the adults with the intuitive understanding that children possess, sensing undercurrents of meaning in conversations they're not supposed to fully comprehend. LeBron knelt down to his daughter's eye level, choosing his words carefully. "I might have met him once, sweetheart. A long time ago, before you were born, but that doesn't matter now. What matters is that you're safe, and we're going home together." He smoothed her hair, still tangled from hours of hiding in the supply closet, and tried to project the calm confidence she needed to see in him. But internally, his mind was racing through implications and connections he didn't want to acknowledge. If Morrison had specifically targeted Riverside Elementary, if he'd known about LeBron's presence there, then this attack wasn't random terrorism, but something far more personal. The thought that his own past might have put Maya and her classmates in danger created a cold knot of guilt in his stomach. Principal Johnson handed him a business card with her personal cell phone number written on the back. "Call me tonight, after Maya's asleep. There are things you need to know about why Derek Morrison chose today, why he chose this school, things that involve your daughter's enrollment records and information that should have been classified." Her voice carried a weight that suggested complicity in something she regretted, knowledge that had contributed to the afternoon's violence. The media attention was intensifying as word spread about the veteran who had single-handedly stopped a school shooting. Reporters pressed against the police barriers, shouting questions about LeBron's military background and how he'd gained access to the building. Camera crews focused on Maya, recognizing her as the daughter of the story's hero, and LeBron instinctively moved to shield her from their intrusive attention. Captain Torres appeared beside them with an offer that felt like both salvation and complication. "Mr. Martinez, I can arrange for you and your daughter to leave through the back entrance, avoid the media circus, but I'll need you to come in tomorrow for a full statement. What you did today saved lives, but we have procedures to follow, questions that need official answers." Maya tugged on her father's sleeve, drawing his attention back to what mattered most in this moment. "Daddy, can we go get ice cream, like we do when I have a bad day at school?" Her request was simultaneously heartbreaking and perfectly normal. A child's way of seeking comfort through familiar routines after experiencing something far beyond her understanding. LeBron picked up his daughter, settling her against his hip as he had countless times before, but knowing that everything had changed in the span of one afternoon. The father who had dropped her off at art class was not the same man carrying her away from a crime scene. The skills that had kept him alive in Afghanistan had now been used to protect American children on what should have been ordinary Tuesday afternoon. As they walked toward their car, avoiding the media attention and police interviews that would dominate the coming days, LeBron caught sight of Derek Morrison being loaded into an ambulance. Even unconscious and restrained, the man's face held the hollow desperation of someone who'd believed violence was his only remaining option for making the world acknowledge his pain. The drive home was quiet, except for Maya's occasional questions about why there had been so many police cars and whether her friends were all okay. LeBron answered what he could while his mind processed the afternoon's revelations. Principal Johnson's hints about classified information and enrollment records suggested connections he didn't want to explore. Morrison's targeting of Riverside Elementary implied knowledge and planning that went far beyond random selection. That evening, after Maya had finally fallen asleep clutching her favorite stuffed animal, LeBron sat in his kitchen staring at Principal Johnson's business card. The phone call would bring answers he wasn't sure he wanted to hear. Explanations that might reveal how his own past had endangered the daughter he'd sworn to protect. But some truths demanded acknowledgement, regardless of their cost, and the principal's secrets might be the key to ensuring that today's violence never repeated itself. The phone call came at 11:30 that night, long after Maya had finally surrendered to exhausted sleep. Principal Johnson's voice carried a weight that spoke of sleepless hours and decisions that had haunted her for months. "Can you meet me at the school? I know it's late, but there are documents you need to see, things I should have told someone a long time ago." LeBron arranged for his neighbor, Mrs. Chen, to stay with Maya and drove through empty streets toward Riverside Elementary. The building looked different in the darkness, crime scene tape fluttering in the autumn wind like yellow ghosts. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows across the parking lot where just hours earlier, children had been reunited with their families. Now the school stood as a monument to violence interrupted, a reminder that safety was always more fragile than anyone wanted to acknowledge. Principal Johnson met him at the main entrance, her usually immaculate appearance replaced by exhaustion and guilt. She'd changed from her professional attire into jeans and a sweater, looking more like a concerned parent than the administrator who'd spent her career protecting other people's children. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would, after everything that happened today." The hallways felt different at night, Familiar spaces transformed by darkness and recent trauma. Their footsteps echoed against lockers and classroom doors as they walked toward the administrative area where LeBron had confronted Derek Morrison. The blood had been cleaned up, but the impact marks on the wall remained as evidence of violence that had no place in an elementary school. Johnson's office had been restored to functionality, though file cabinets stood open and papers remained scattered across her desk. She gestured for LeBron to sit in one of the parent conference chairs while she retrieved a locked metal box from her personal safe. "What I'm about to show you violates several federal regulations, and probably ends my career. But after today, I can't keep carrying this alone." The first document she placed before him was Maya's enrollment application from 3 years earlier, when LeBron had moved to Pine Valley seeking a fresh start after his military discharge. Standard paperwork, he'd thought at the time, requesting basic information about emergency contacts and medical history. But attached to the familiar forms were additional pages he'd never seen, forms bearing official military seals and classification stamps. "Your daughter's enrollment triggered an automated alert in the Department of Defense database," Johnson explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your military record, your service in Afghanistan, your involvement in certain classified operations." The system flagged Maya as the dependent of a high-value intelligence asset. LeBron felt his blood turn cold as he read through documents that detailed his combat service with clinical precision. Operations he'd participated in, enemy personnel he'd helped capture or eliminate, intelligence he'd gathered during his tours overseas, information that was supposed to remain classified, buried in military files that civilian school administrators should never have accessed. "How did you get this?" he demanded, though part of him already suspected the answer. The federal education grants that had helped fund Riverside Elementary's recent security upgrades, the technology improvements that had seemed too generous for a small-town school, the administrative software that connected student records to databases far beyond normal educational needs. Johnson's composure finally cracked, tears flowing freely as she revealed the extent of her complicity. The grants came with conditions. Reporting requirements about certain students whose parents had military backgrounds. "I thought it was just bureaucratic oversight, keeping track of veterans' children for support services. I never imagined they were creating target lists." The second set of documents revealed the true scope of the surveillance program. Dozens of schools across the country, all receiving similar grants, all required to flag children whose parents had served in sensitive military positions. A network designed ostensibly for support and protection, but actually creating a comprehensive database of potential leverage points against former service members. Derek Morrison wasn't acting alone, Johnson continued, spreading additional files across her desk. He was part of a group of discharged veterans who discovered this program. They believed the government was using their children as insurance policies, making sure former soldiers couldn't reveal classified information by threatening what mattered most to them. LeBron studied Morrison's file, recognizing the trajectory of a man who'd served his country honorably before being betrayed by the very system that had trained him to fight. Medical discharge after a roadside bomb had left him with traumatic brain injury and PTSD. Benefits appeals denied. Treatment requests ignored. A steady decline from decorated combat veteran to desperate domestic terrorist, convinced that violence was his only remaining voice. "He came here 6 months ago," Johnson admitted, posed as a concerned parent researching schools for his nephew. "Asked detailed questions about our security protocols, our emergency procedures, which students belong to which families. I gave him a tour, showed him our state-of-the-art safety systems, never suspecting he was planning to test them." The timeline Morrison had constructed was methodical and patient. He'd identified LeBron through the classified database, learned Maya's schedule and daily routines, studied the school's layout and response procedures. The attack wasn't random terrorism, but a carefully orchestrated demonstration designed to expose the surveillance program by forcing one of its targets to reveal their combat capabilities in defense of their child. "Why didn't you report this when you realized what was happening?" LeBron asked, though he understood the impossible position Johnson had found herself in. Reveal the surveillance program and lose the federal funding that kept the school operational. Stay silent and become complicit in putting children at risk. Johnson's answer came through broken sobs. I convinced myself it was harmless, that the reporting was just paperwork, that no one would ever use the information maliciously. When Morrison showed up asking questions, I thought he was just another overprotective parent. I never connected his interest to the classified reports I'd been filing. The weight of institutional betrayal settled over LeBron like a familiar burden. The same government that had sent him to war had then used his daughter as a potential weapon against him. The school he trusted to keep Maya safe had been systematically compromised by the very programs claiming to protect military families. The fresh start he'd sought in Pine Valley had been undermined from the moment he'd filled out enrollment paperwork. "There are others," Johnson said, producing a final folder thick with similar documentation. 23 children in schools across Colorado whose parents served in classified operations. All of them flagged in the same database, all of them potential targets for anyone who discovers the system. LeBron thought about those other families, other single parents and military couples who'd moved to small towns seeking anonymity and safety for their children, parents who'd filled out school forms believing they were providing emergency contact information, not enabling government surveillance that put their kids at risk, children who went to sleep each night unaware that their enrollment in elementary school had made them pawns in games they couldn't understand. "What happens now?" he asked. Though he suspected the answer would force him to make choices he'd hoped to avoid. The quiet life he'd built in Pine Valley was over. Maya's safety had been compromised by systems designed to protect her. The illusion of civilian normalcy had been shattered by the reality that his military service would follow them wherever they tried to hide. Johnson handed him a flash drive containing copies of all the documents. "I'm resigning tomorrow and turning everything over to the FBI. The surveillance program needs to be exposed, even if it means destroying my career and facing federal charges. Those children deserve better than being used as leverage against their parents." The drive home through empty streets gave LeBron time to process the full scope of what he'd learned. Maya's innocent enrollment in 3rd grade had triggered a cascade of events that culminated in armed violence at her school. His own service to his country had been perverted into a threat against the daughter he'd sworn to protect. The fresh start he'd thought he'd found in Pine Valley had been an illusion maintained by people who viewed his child as a strategic asset. At home, he checked on Maya, finding her sleeping peacefully despite the day's trauma. Her room was filled with the innocent artifacts of childhood. Artwork taped to walls, stuffed animals arranged with careful attention, books about princesses and dragons stacked beside her bed. None of it had changed, but everything felt different now that he understood how her simple existence had been weaponized against him. The decision he faced wasn't just about their future in Pine Valley, but about how to protect Maya while ensuring that other military families wouldn't face similar dangers. Going public with Johnson's revelations would expose the surveillance program but also paint a target on their backs. Staying silent might preserve their safety, but would leave dozens of other children vulnerable to similar attacks. LeBron sat in his kitchen until dawn broke over the mountains, studying the documents that revealed how thoroughly his past had contaminated their present. The man who'd carried his daughter away from Riverside Elementary the previous afternoon had believed they were finally safe from the violence that had defined his military service. Now he understood that safety was another illusion, and protecting Maya would require confronting forces far more dangerous than a single disturbed veteran with a rifle. 3 months later, LeBron stood before a packed congressional hearing room, Maya beside him in her best dress, her small hand gripping his with the quiet strength she'd inherited from both her parents. The marble hallways of the Capitol building echoed with the footsteps of reporters, lawmakers, and other military families who'd traveled from across the country to witness this moment. What had begun as one father's desperate fight to protect his daughter had evolved into a national reckoning with government surveillance and the price of military service. The committee chairman, a gray-haired veteran himself, called the session to order with unusual solemnity. "Today we examine the Classified School Watch program and its impact on military families. Mr. Martinez, you have the floor." The cameras focused on LeBron as he adjusted the microphone, acutely aware that his words would reach far beyond this room to other parents who discovered their children's schools had been compromised. "Senators, my daughter Maya enrolled in 3rd grade to learn math and reading, not to become a classified asset in a government database," LeBron began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "When I served 3 tours in Afghanistan, I believed I was protecting American children's right to attend school safely. I never imagined my own child's education would be used as a weapon against our family." The testimony that followed revealed the full scope of the School Watch program. 47 schools across 12 states, all receiving federal grants tied to reporting requirements about military dependence. Over 300 children flagged in databases accessible to contractors and officials whose security clearances had never been properly vetted. A system designed ostensibly for support that had created vulnerability maps for anyone seeking to pressure former service members. Maya's presence in the hearing room served as a powerful reminder of the human cost of institutional overreach. When hostile questioning from one senator suggested that military families should expect such scrutiny as part of their service commitment, Maya looked up at her father with confusion that spoke louder than any prepared statement. She was 9 years old now, old enough to understand that adults had used her school enrollment to hurt people, but still young enough to believe her father could fix anything. Principal Johnson, who'd resigned her position and faced federal charges for her cooperation with the FBI investigation, testified about the impossible choices administrators faced when federal funding came with hidden conditions. "I told myself I was protecting the children by accepting the grants," she said, her voice breaking as she looked toward Maya. "Instead, I made them targets for anyone who could access our reporting systems." The revelation that Derek Morrison had obtained classified student information through a security contractor who'd kept database access after his clearance expired sent shockwaves through the intelligence community. Morrison's attack on Riverside Elementary hadn't been the desperate act of a disturbed veteran, but a calculated demonstration designed to expose government surveillance by forcing targeted parents to reveal their combat capabilities defending their children. LeBron's testimony detailed the impossible position military families found themselves in when their service records were used to justify monitoring their children. "We serve our country, then spend years looking over our shoulders wondering if that service makes our families less safe instead of more secure. No parent should have to choose between their child's education and their family's privacy." The emotional climax came when Maya was invited to address the committee directly. Standing on a box so she could reach the microphone, she spoke with the clarity that only children possess. "My daddy stopped the bad man because that's what daddies do. But the grown-ups who were supposed to keep schools safe made it so the bad man could find us. That's not fair to kids who just want to learn." The legislation that emerged from the hearings, known as Maya's Law, required full disclosure of any federal programs involving surveillance of students or their families. Schools receiving federal grants would be prohibited from sharing student information with intelligence agencies without explicit parental consent and court oversight. The existing School Watch program was terminated, its databases purged, and affected families offered relocation assistance and counseling services. For LeBron and Maya, the victory came with personal costs that would take years to fully understand. Their quiet life in Pine Valley was over, replaced by a public profile that made genuine anonymity impossible. Maya would grow up knowing her name was attached to federal legislation, her childhood trauma transformed into a symbol of government accountability. The simplicity they'd sought after his military service had been permanently complicated by their unwilling role as public advocates. But there were unexpected gifts as well. The other military families who testified alongside them had formed lasting bonds, creating a support network of people who understood the unique challenges of protecting children whose parents had served in classified operations. Maya found herself part of an extended family of military kids who'd faced similar dangers and emerged stronger for their shared experience. The small apartment they'd moved to outside Washington, D.C. was filled with letters from military families across the country, thanking them for their courage in exposing the surveillance program. Children Maya's age had drawn pictures of her testifying before Congress, portraying her as a hero for speaking truth to power. The shy third grader who'd hidden in a supply closet during a school attack had become an advocate for other military children's safety. On quiet evenings, when the media attention faded and congressional hearings gave way to normal family routines, LeBron would find Maya at their kitchen table working on homework assignments that had nothing to do with government surveillance or military service. Math worksheets and book reports that represented the ordinary childhood he'd always wanted to give her. In Chippewa, those moments, watching his daughter tackle long division with the same determination she'd shown addressing senators, he understood that their fight had been worth the cost. The man who dropped his daughter off at art class on that October afternoon had been transformed by circumstances beyond his control into something he'd never intended to become. A public figure whose personal tragedy had sparked institutional change. The father who'd used military training to protect his child had discovered that the greatest victory wasn't stopping one disturbed veteran, but ensuring that other military families wouldn't face similar betrayals. Maya looked up from her homework to find her father watching her with the expression she'd come to recognize as his proud face. "Daddy, do you think the other kids are safer now because of what we did?" she asked, with the directness that had made senators uncomfortable and reporters scramble for their cameras. LeBron smiled, remembering the little girl who'd asked for ice cream after the worst day of her young life. "I think they're safer because you were brave enough to tell the truth, even when it was scary." Outside their window, the lights of the Capitol building glowed in the distance, a reminder that democracy sometimes required ordinary people to do extraordinary things to protect what mattered most. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.